Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining this session. I'm Paloma Graciani-Picardo, and today I'm together with Brittney Washington a few highlights of the Harry Ransom Center project within the LD4P cohort. For the past 2 years, our book cataloging department has engaged in affinity groups, profile development, and linked data cataloging. This has been an extremely positive learning experience, and now that the project has wrapped up, we would like to start a conversation with other folks who are also working or thinking about working with special collection materials and linked data. Please don't hesitate to reach out if any of the points mentioned here sparks your curiosity or you have similar case studies that would like to share. For some reason, okay. In September 2018, the Ransom Center joined the LD4P core with the main goal of evaluating models, vocabularies, and best practices for item-level description of rare materials using RDF. Our project has focused on the center's pre-1700s bibliographic holdings with the Pforzheimer Library of Early English Literature as the primary study case. Around 20,000 MAR records were submitted to share BDE for transformation to B-frame. The analysis of the mappings used for programmatic conversion was also a goal of our project, together with building capacity through local experimentation and engaging with the library community in the development of shareable policies, techniques, and workflows. We did not have the capacity to analyze the converted data until the past few months. By then, the department had finally hired a grant-based semantic technologies research assistant who focused on the evaluation of available open source triple stores for local testing. Her support has been critical to accomplish this goal. By loading the RDF data into a local triple store, we were finally able to gain further understanding of mapping patterns. Not surprisingly, these mappings mainly address a broader array of use cases within the library general collection. Copy-specific information, such as the one registered in 590 and 790, 791 MAR fields, had not made the move to our new B-frame dataset. A series of Spec.Coll queries help to further our understanding of the data and identify other potential areas of concern for special collections practices. This here is an example of a Spec.Coll query I use for retrieving all printers within the related instance. Don't worry if Spec.Coll looks like a foreign language to you. The main point here is that because all contributor access points were mapped to the B-frame work domain, regardless of the role, one must query the work description in order to retrieve printers. There are a few other aspects of these mappings that evidence potential data loss for the description of special collection resources. The enhancement of programmatic conversions with B-frame extensions such as ARM, which Elizabeth we will talk in more about later, will really benefit institutions which rely on highly detailed object-oriented resource descriptions. It is not offbeat to anticipate that a joint effort coming from the special collections community will be necessary in order to address and support transformation scenarios for those edge cases based on special formats and material evidence descriptions. I don't know how to go back now. We had not had the insights necessary to analyze our B-frame dataset had not been for the time invested since the beginning of the grant on application profile development. Luckily, there was a set of Library of Congress profiles, including a rare materials one, for us to get started. Being fairly new to B-frame, our approach was to dissect the resource templates and compare them to each other in order to get a deeper understanding of B-frame modeling approaches. Looking directly at the JSON files was really helpful to understand the profile structure and transform them into easily manageable spreadsheets. Then we were ready to focus on enhancing the item resource template. We chose the Pforzheimer library, a collection rich in material evidence information, as our test use case. Creating the Pforzheimer test profiles was an opportunity to dive into the art and rare material B-frame ontology extension, or ARM. We had multiple department working sessions analyzing ARM's modeling recommendations and pre-existing ARM-based shackled profiles. The first HRC ARM test templates are full with modeling flaws and inconsistencies. However, those discussions and hands-on experience were crucial for us to get the full scope of the ontology. Eventually, we relied on Yale's ARM resource templates developed by Tim Thompson to serve as the basis to our current HRC profiles. The HRC rare material profiles are a set of 5 main and nested resource templates, which are work, instance, item, bound with, and bound with item, and 7 nested templates: binding, citation, custodial history, signature statement, admin metadata, collection, and temporal. It mixes components of the LD4P based profiles, the Yale templates, and further local customization based on HRC specific needs and catalogers' feedback, which has been critical to fine-tune the templates and identify pain points. Ontologies used include bframe, ARM, RDF, and RDFS. For vocabularies, we are using the ones on idlob.gov and the Getty link open data vocabularies, all available as lookups in Sinopia through a question authority service. We even requested the question authority team to add ligatus for binding description. Only 2 relevant vocabularies for us are not currently available as lookup services in Sinopia. These are periodo, a gazetteer of periods for linking and visualizing data, and RBMS vocabularies, which are not yet available as link open data. And here is a snapshot of one of our whiteboard sessions while Brittney takes over the stage. You ready, Brittney?
I am. Okay.
Nice.
You can go ahead. So one of the reasons why I felt it was important to be a part of this grant is because special collections and materials have such unique use cases, especially in terms of item or object specific information. And if these aren't considered by decision makers for the tools that we eventually end up adopting, that'll result in clunky data representation or even loss of or hidden data entirely. So having a community to be a part of to help with advocacy and also for inspiration, help, feedback is really invaluable. And this was something LD4P2 was able to give us through the Rare Materials Affinity group. Next slide, please. The Rare Materials Affinity group was started by Audrey Pearson from the Beinecke Library as a way to bring together cohort members who were working with special collections resources, not just rare books. We had artist books, auction catalogs, manuscripts, and others all represented in the group. We've maintained close communication with other groups with similar interests, the Bibliographic Standards Committee and the ARM Development Group, which includes members of RLIS, RBMS, and SAA. And the acronyms for all of those are spelled out on the slides. Members of this group discussed application profile creation, cataloging using the Sinopia tool, developments of ARM, and so much more. Though LD4P2 has come to a close, the group has agreed to continue to meet and discuss, and will continue to focus on utilizing linked data for special collections. One of the things I really like about the LD4 community is also a thing I like most about the Rare Materials Affinity group. It exists kind of only as a place to discuss linked data. So our focus will always be on special collections, but as membership evolves, we'll doubtless be looking beyond just LD4P2 and Sinopia. We're hoping to grow to include more diverse membership, institutions big or small with varying levels of resources and expertise are all vital to this process. In order to have a seat at the table, we need to have a loud enough voice to be heard. So if you're interested in being a part of this group, email me and I'll get you put on the list. My email address will be at the end of these slides. Currently, we're taking a small break in meetings. So right now they're just on an as needed basis, but we're hoping to pick them back up in several months. So to wrap up, we have some questions for the audience. Let's see, how much time do we have? Oh, well, we don't have very much time, but I'll go ahead and I'll send those out on the Slack. And also, if you want to join us for the social hour, both Paloma and myself will be there, and we hope to hear from you. So the questions we have are, what type of linked data projects are you working on? And to that end, what kind of materials are being described? What ontologies or vocabularies are being used? How are you ensuring interoperability? And I'm also really curious about what kind of communities you rely on for support in learning linked data for special collections. So I don't want to take too much time with answering those questions, but please feel free to send those in the Slack. And we'd also love to hear from you if you want to email us directly. There are our email addresses. So Paloma, did you have anything else you wanted to add before I wrap it up?
No, really.
Okay, cool. Okay.
That's so great. And thanks for the encouragement for continuing the conversation in Slack and at the social hour. So let's bring Elizabeth up so that she can give her lightning talk and so that we can get to our Q&A session. So Elizabeth, you want to go ahead and share what you've got to share here?
Yeah.
Yeah, and once again, Elizabeth is our archivist who likes linked data at the Rose Library at Emory. So
Yes, I do like linked data. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, because as I mentioned in the presentation I gave earlier, we're still really at infancy stage with linked data. So I'm happy to be back to present on behalf of the Art and Rare Materials, or ARM task force, which Paloma mentioned in the previous presentation. And that task force is working on an extension of BibFrame. This effort is designed to supplement the existing BibFrame ontology and specifically address the needs of special collections material, so rare books, art, and archives, which often differ from the general circulating collection. My aim today is to introduce the project, list some examples of how the ARM ontology addresses special collections use cases, and then provide some information on our timeline, and particularly when the ontology is going to be ready for everyone's review. I want first to acknowledge the vast amount of work of each of the members of the ARM task force, some of whom are on this call, and I'm hoping will help me out with questions. I am merely a representative today. All of these people have been equally involved. I set up a lot of meetings, so therefore I get to present. This group has been working diligently over the past year, so attending biweekly calls, proposing new use cases, and modeling example data. The task force includes representatives from SAA, RBMS, and ARLIS. And at the conclusion, once we have a draft of the ontology, the task force will be reaching out to these sponsoring organizations when that draft is done for their review and endorsement. The ARM project, just to give a little bit of history of the project, it has its roots in two separate linked data for libraries interest groups. So the Art Frame group and Rare Materials. Each was formed to work on modeling issues with artworks and rare books. As work proceeded in these groups, it became apparent that many of the modeling needs overlapped. So physical description, physical condition and conservation, custodial history, measurements, awards and exhibitions, so on and so on. And that many of those use cases met with both of those communities. It was thus decided to merge the two projects and jointly develop a single set of models. Those two projects became ARM, Art and Rare Materials, an ontology designed to provide descriptive pathways for rare materials not accommodated within BibFrame. This group wrapped up the final phase, or the first phase of its work in 2018, and released a proposed model, which I'm going to call ARM 0.1, which is available in GitHub. And then in 2019, that group reconvened with some new members, me being one of them, particularly from the archives community, to address comments and questions from the community from the first 0.1 ontology, as well as add archives use cases, and thereby address all special collections material in that one single ontology. So why is this work necessary? For institutions looking to move entirely to BibFrame and away from MARC, it's essential to ensure that standards-based data requirements from the rare community are met. The ARM ontology is designed to specifically respond to those needs and maintain the same level of description as exists currently. And I'll say, you know, you put up slides like this and they used to, you needed to have them with like images of Hades, but BibFrame that's coming actually at this point, I think is more exciting than scary. And projects like ARM are really designed to make sure that archives, art museums, and rare collections can participate in the excitement of BibFrame as well. These are only some of the many use cases the ARM task force has identified as missing or unsupported in the current version of BibFrame. For many of these, adding this information is technically possible, but requires heavy use of textual notes rather than dedicated classes of information, thereby limiting the advantages of linked data structures. A major thrust of ARM is to ensure that data is encoded in RDF in a way that it can be reused and queried, requiring new classes and properties for encoding this information. In choosing which use cases needed additional modeling, the ARM task force first looked for solutions within BibFrame and other existing ontologies when possible, and only developed new classes, properties, and vocabulary terms when absolutely necessary. Our intent is not to replace BibFrame with a separate ontology, but rather work within and enhance the current structure. For instance, the BibFrame contribution model, which documents agent interactions with a resource, is maintained within ARM, and agents are associated with events and resources through a contribution resource rather than a new methodology incongruous with BibFrame. As I've mentioned, a major guiding principle of ARM has been to encourage and support more queryable data. For instance, in the current MARC cataloging practice, dimensions are recorded in one single subfield, so MARC 300 subfield C, even if the content standard or domain-specific cataloging practice direct the cataloger to record the measurements in much more detail. BibFrame has carried this same principle forward by defining the data type property BibFrame dimensions with an expected textual literal value. So we're still recording just a textual note. However, there are a number of domain-specific ontologies, such as VRA and CDOC-CRM, that do provide more granularity, and we wanted to incorporate that functionality into ARM. And here is ARM's proposed modeling. Notice that instead of a literal value, ARM encodes each measurement, the length, width, and height, separately. This enables querying each measurement and processing the data for each of these dimensions, potentially supporting implementations such as software that could calculate shelving space for a given collection for collection management purposes. Using the native modeling in BibFrame would only allow that information to be displayed, not queried. Another feature of ARM is the ability to encode event-based information in a structured way. Robust documentation of provenance is particularly important in the art and archives communities. Current descriptive practice in MARC generally relies on a series of notes fields for describing provenance, and BibFrame maintains that model of typed literal note fields. ARM proposes a generic event class that enables granular documentation and tracking of all events, such as conservation actions and provenance events, including acquisition, appraisal, and disposition. As with measurements, this approach is heavily influenced by other RDF-based ontologies, such as PROV and Premise, as well as the before-mentioned CDOC-CRM, the link.art project based on CDOC-CRM, and even the general web ontology schema.org. Instead of a textual note, entification of the data in the proposed ARM data model enables a comprehensive view of the life cycle of a resource over time. This event class notes what changes were made for a resource, when, and by whom. This will probably look familiar to those of you who know Premise or PROV, two data models that also include an event class. This information contextualizes the object for researchers and maintains the authenticity, integrity, and reliability of records. The flexibility of this modeling means that pre- and post-custodial events can be described as granularly as local implementations require. The task force has been particularly aware of legacy use cases where data may be encoded in textual notes, and the ARM modeling is designed to support both legacy and newly created data. It will be up to implementers how granular they need to be, whether it be providing a textual note or a sequence of individual events that document the full custodial history of the object. There's, of course, much, much more to ARM than these two examples that I've shown you. But I hope I've been able to demonstrate how ARM both supports existing BibFrame modeling while providing an enhanced path forward when needed. We have set out not to create a competing model, but a complementary one that recognizes the unique needs of special collections material and the descriptive structures we maintain about that material. So where are we going from here? We're currently tying up some outstanding issues this summer, and we plan to release a revised ontology along with implementation guidelines sometime this fall. One of the major questions we're still working through is where to host the final ontology and how to address additional vocabulary terms that we need for implementation. As I mentioned, the final recommendations will be submitted to the sponsoring organizations for review. We will be also looking for general reviewers, especially within the rare books, archives, and art communities, particularly ones that are in the process of implementing BibFrame. There are so many ontologies out there that are rarely used, but we are hopeful that ARM will bring a real benefit to the descriptive community. If your local use case is not represented or you see potential issues in our modeling, please consider sending us some comments. Thanks for listening, and please feel free to contact myself or Jason Kavari, who are both the ARM co-chairs, if you have any questions or want to get in touch about the project. Otherwise, look for a draft release to come out in the coming months. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much to all three of you for your presentations. We do have just a couple of minutes for Q&A before we switch over to our final speaker for the day. Let's see, first question. Let's see, these are all ARM questions. Can you talk a little bit more about the ARM templates and their integrations with BibFrame profiles? Would we expect to have ARM profiles, or would ARM extensions easily fit into any BibFrame profile in which they would be appropriate?
So I'm going to say, please post that to BibFrame, the BibFrame to Slack for my colleagues to answer some of this. My understanding of this is that there will be ARM templates within the BibFrame profiles. I'm not sure exactly how they're integrated. Jason would be a better resource for that. But we are working on ensuring that Sinopia will be able to read some of what we're developing.
Okay, and that was posted into Slack as well, so hopefully somebody will pick it up there. Great. Let's see, how does ARM compare to CDOC CRM? Are there lots of properties and classes not covered by the CRM?
Yeah, that's a really good question. ARM is not exactly CDOC CRM. How it compares, I would say, is that ARM is going to be more faithful to BibFrame data models, where really the central point of description is going to be that resource, and then we'll have contributors hanging off of that and events off of that, rather than trying to see it as a more of a custodial history. So they complement each other. I think, though, that the data model is fairly separate for the two. Link.art is a really good project to look at in terms of how CDOC CRM is being modeled in the art community. And I do know that ARM diverges quite a bit from that.
Great. And a final question for the moment, although you guys have got a couple of minutes to put some more questions in. For the ARM review, are there plans in creating some resource templates in Sinopia so that reviewers can try it out?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I will add that to a list to bring back to the group. I do know at least Yale is developing templates within Sinopia that they are trying out there that are based on ARM. So I will circle back and see if there are plans for us to share those. I will say that it is out of scope for the ARM Ontology project to fully develop those templates for Sinopia, that we're really not trying to create application profiles. But as a matter, of course, of us testing the ontology, they're being developed. So we probably will be able to share those.
Okay, super. I'm not seeing any questions at the moment. Let's go ahead and get Dinah. Let's see. Actually, I have something that I want to share with you guys. So while Dinah's getting ready to present, I would like you guys, since this is the snack presentation, like you guys to go back over to Poll Everywhere and choose a snack to go with your snack. I know this joke has been done before, but humor me, people, and pick a snack to go with your snack presentation. I know. I told you I was having perhaps too much fun with these slides, but we have just a couple moments. It's not showing up, darn it. Oh, here we go. There, that must have been so tempting for you guys to see all of the snacks and not be able to choose them. Sorry, I'm learning as I go. Let's see, but getting back to business here, as my high school teacher would say. Okay, great, we've got a question for Brittney and Paloma. How are you feeling about the BibFrame model and its ease in assisting cataloging for rare materials? What are its limitations, et cetera, for rare materials? Are they just such different limitations than we have in MARC cataloging? Or are they just different limitations than we have in MARC cataloging? So Brittney or Paloma, are you still?
Yeah.
Okay, you're
I
probably
can
thinking
answer
it's hard because you guys can't look at each other and say, who's going to take
Right.
that?
Yeah. That's exactly what I was doing. I was like, well, let Paloma get it if she wants to go.
I can give a go to it.
Sure.
And then if you want to add something, Brittney. But one of the things that we found with the BibFrame ontology was that there were not that many properties that apply to the item. So because that was our main focus was to develop like very strong research templates for the item description, especially we were finding a bunch of limitations with the BibFrame ontology, and that's why we were looking at ARM to cover that gap. And we did a lot of testing with ARM, and then also working with the Affinity group and being able to see at what other members of the Affinity group were doing. So Yale came up with like really nice templates that we use as our base, but yeah, all of our item properties, most of them come from ARM, and in order to extend the description of specific aspects like custodial history or bindings or markings, all that came out of ARM.
Thank you. And we have one more question about ARM, which is for Elizabeth or potentially other folks, which is that the implementation notes were useful, although hard to discover. And do you have any plans to make these more complete and discoverable in the 1.0 release?
That's actually really helpful feedback. We are planning on building a set of implementation guidelines, but how I read this question is being interested a little bit in this decision-making process and not just guidelines for how to apply the ontology. So I will bring that back to the group and see how we can make sure that we release that sort of documentation in a way that it's findable.
Okay, super. So good. Let's see. So I think that's all the open Q&A I see now.